All right. So yeah, hey, happy Pride Month, man.
Yeah, man, it's finally June. Doesn't feel like it outside, but we are finally at June.
Holy shit, man! Like we're almost halfway. We are almost halfway through 2025. It's hard to think about it that way.
It really is hard to think about. Like we're already halfway through another year when it feels like it just started.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I'm kicking off Pride pretty pretty well today because the way I've been starting the celebration has been I've been drinking with the Jocks.
Are you sure that's a good idea?
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of planet Earth. And the way that we measure that is we go from Ukraine to Uganda, but the long way around. This podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And it is hosted by two dashingly good looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I'm the only. I'm the one who needs a second cup of coffee just to, sometimes just power through that next phase of his day. Ryan James Kearns.
And I'm the one, the only. I'm not drinking anything right now, so hopefully this all works out. Matthew James Durzik. And for those of you who wonder what this show is, it is pretty much right there in the title. Hey, listen to this. Every week, me and Ryan look at each other and say, hey, listen to this. We talk about an album that we like, or maybe it's something topical, or maybe it's a current release, or maybe we get into certain themes over the course of several weeks, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, Ryan, what did we do last week?
Last week we took a trip down memory lane with covering the Marshall Mathers LP released by Eminem, and for me that album was a decent part of my childhood. It was a pleasure going back into that album, though, for the sake of reviewing it in the way that we did, recontextualizing songs like "Stan" and like a couple of the other themes that are sprinkled throughout the LP, where M is addressing his haters for what he talks about in his records. It was a great time for me. It kind of did encourage me to dive further back into M's catalog, and I might do that later on today. Who knows?
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it was interesting going back on it too because there were moments of it that really stood out, but also moments that felt really, really dated. So yeah, if you want to hear our thoughts on that album, feel free to go ahead and check that episode out for after you're done listening to this, or if you want to listen to it right now, you can just pause this, take a nearly 2 hour detour, and get back into the swing of things with what we're talking about this week, which leads us to what we're going to be talking about this week. Ryan, what are we talking about this week?
So, for this week, we are kicking off another DEI initiative here at Hey, Listen to This by, it is June that we are, recording this in. And June is Pride Month. And Pride is, for those of you who aren't aware, who just, live in an Amish country. Pride is basically a month to help celebrate members of the LGBTQ plus community, and the so for this month we are going to be highlighting artists and bands who have members that are representations of said community. So for this week, I pulled a Captain Phillips on you, and I said, "Hey, we are listening to this album. We are reviewing this album. I don't care if you like it or not, man. We are doing it." And that album is the 2014 release by the band Against Me, and that album is entitled Transgender Dysphoria Blues. Now, for those of you who are out there like, whoa, 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 what's it Against Me? And what member of their band is part of this LGBTQ plus community? Well, dear listener, I will tell you such facts and stories here. So the band's front person, her name is Laura Jane Grace, and she was born November 8th, 1980, in Fort Benning, Georgia. Her early life was, she was moving around a lot because she was a military brat. So, she wasn't able to, establish friends or, just really settle into a group with her life due to, the nature of her family upbringing. So, throughout the years, her life took a decisive turn at the age of 17 because she was arrested on Independence Day. And after that, she really got into the punk subculture. And as you do at the time when you're like that age, you become immersed in it. And this immersion led her into forming the project called Against Me in 1997. Now, this project initially began as a solo acoustic endeavor. Basically, the Laura performed music under this project name whenever opportunities arose, and she drew influence from early acoustic protest music. After gaining some groundswell and getting other band members involved, they released their debut album back in 2002, and that album is called Against Me, is reinventing Axl Rose. Great album, very folk punk-ish, taking the basic core nucleus of what Laura was going for at the time and expanding into a full band sound. The band gets signed to Fat Wreck Chords, that's a prominent independent punk label, and for the rest of the decade, they released really great records. Their next release came in 2003, which was Against Me as the Eternal Cowboy, and then in 2005 they dropped Searching for a Former Clarity. 2007, New Wave, and in 2010, White Crosses. Now, dear listener out there, you might be questioning, okay, cool. But what's significant about this band and how do they fit within the context of the LGBTQ plus community? Well, dear listener, let me tell you. Laura Jane Grace, she's a transgender woman, and her journey into fully embracing her gender identity was interesting because you get different breadcrumbs here or there throughout the discography of the group. There was an EP that was dropped in 2002 entitled The Disco Before the Breakdown, and in that EP you get different themes of the fixation with the body and forbidden sexuality. That was a fantastic EP. Heavily recommend the dear listener checking that out. And then things get a little bit more clear or a little bit more explicit in the 2005 album Searching for a Former Clarity. You get lines in the title track. Dressing up in women's clothes, compulsions you never knew, the reasons too. And then things get very clear in 2007 in the song The Ocean from the album New Wave, and the lyrics read, "If I could have chosen, I would have been born a woman. My mother once told me she would have named me Laura." So that's pretty direct, and considering Laura Jane Grace's name is Laura Jane Grace, that lyric does reflect that pretty too much a T. And so Laura came out in May of 2012 in a Rolling Stone article, and for that moment to happen, it was seen as a first for a major rock star, and that set a precedent within the music industry. And considering all of the turmoil that she was going through at the time, and just where she the journey that she had to go through battling gender dysphoria, this basically sets the stage for the album that we're talking about today, Transgender Dysphoria Blues. And specifically with this LP, work for it began shortly after Laura's public announcement about her transition, and it was released under Grace's own label. So like you get uh, Grace's ability to like have a much greater control over the recording process, just everything from the album to a T. And before I go on with my own thoughts and relationships and my experience and my journey with Against Me and Laura Jane Grace as a whole, I'm going to turn it over to Matthew. Matthew, when it comes to Laura Jane Grace, Against Me as a whole, what is your experience with the group and that specific artist?
Honestly, my experience is relatively limited. I do remember this album in particular because I believe it was at the tail end of when we were in college together at Geneva that you had recommended this album very highly to me, and I remember liking it when I listened to it for the first time, and then never really embedded it until this review here. And then over the course of the last several years, as we've hung out, you've sent me articles, and we think we've listened to maybe at least one or two of Laura's solo EPs, just hanging out. But aside from that, I really have not dug deep into Against Me. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from as a relatively non Against Me fan. Not that I'm against them, so to speak, but I've never really gotten heavy into them.
And okay, cool. So for me, my relationship with Against Me and even specifically Laura Jane Grace as a whole, I really got into them after seeing them live in concert over at Mr. Small's Theater when they were doing their White Crosses tour. That whole show was fantastic. It got me hooked into another band called the Screaming Females. Fantastic, fantastic group there. It was one of the only true times that an opening act literally blew my brain wide open. But this is not a show about the Screaming Females. It's about Against Me. So after that show, as one does after they go to a concert and they really enjoy it, like I dove back into Against Me's back catalog, and I really got into like a lot of the stuff that they had to offer. Now, keep in mind context here. White Cross is released in 2010. Laura comes out in 2012, saying that she's transgender. So, over the years, they were one of my favorite bands. And then that Rolling Stone article comes out, and then, I actually had to take a little bit of time away from the group because, like, the whole concept of, like, a transgender person was completely new to me. This was, before transgender rights and transgender people as a whole became into like a mainstream narrative. This is before the whole Caitlyn Jenner, Kendall Jenner thing. Yeah. So, but over the years, and especially after reading the book that essentially accompanies this album here, that book is Tranny by Laura Jane Grace. Like, I came to just realize that the bare facts of transgender people, they go through a mental battle day in day out of like who they are as a person, and they just deserve the right to like just exist and just be a person alongside of everybody else in society. That's what they are asking for. So after I had that revelation, I really enjoyed like anything else that Laura brought to the table, whether it's like the Against Me album that comes after the one that we're talking about today, or any of the other projects that she's literally touched, whether it's a single featured at like the Flight Oligarchy tour, or like just random like LPs that no one ever talks about. Yeah, she's always like I'm always a huge fan of her work, and it's thanks to her that when it comes to like transgender rights, I get particularly upset because people just want to live. So like I'm glad that she was able to open me up to be a more open-minded kind of person. I'm always appreciative of that. So yeah, that's my experience with Against Me and Laura Jane Grace as in a nutshell. Very important band in my life and a very important artist, specifically before there.
And understandably so, because again, it sort of shaped your thoughts about this particular issue. I don't have a parallel with that musically, but at the end of the day, I think we all, at this point, especially in 2025, have someone we know who's dealing with that. And like you said, Ryan, they're human beings too. They deserve love, respect, and you know, the grace of just living an everyday normal life, whatever that means in the year of 2025. But I am ready to discuss this album track by track, and I will throw it over to you for the title track, which is Transgender Dysphoria Blues.
So, yeah, coming out right out of the gate, Transgender Dysphoria Blues brings to the table countless amount of lyrics about, like, the struggles that transgender people deal with on a day in day out basis, especially maybe, like when they're first transitioning. And before I even begin to say like another word here, I just wanted to be very clear that both me and Matt are straight heterosexual men in America. So like if we misspeak about like any specific nuances or anything about like what it means to be a transgender person throughout this whole review, Lord forgive us. We come from a place of genuine love. But that being said, the lyrics that I alluded to in terms of like the struggles that transgender people go through, you get like the pre-chorus, which is pretty much the song in a nutshell. You get the lyrics. You want them to notice the ragged ends of your summer dress. You want them to see you like they see every other girl. Like right there, like that's basically what transgender people want to like experience. The lyrics following that are basically saying like, hey, this is how society sees you, and that's a damn shame. The outside of the lyrics though, like Laura's ability to emote passionately with the vocals throughout this whole track here, it's great. She does her work to a T, and it's one of the many reasons why I love her as an artist. Instrumentation wise, the way that the whole track kicks off with that little drum roll and like the guitar doing like hitting those chords, like that's a great moment. And then like also like shout out to the bass player, like they're doing a solid job as well with the opening. The chorus is pretty solid though, nothing really too stand out ish. But yeah, just overall though, Transgender Dysphoria Blues is one hell of a way to open up the album for me. Did not make it into my top 3, but and for full contextual sake, I have a top 3 and a bottom nothing because I respect this album.
I also have a top 3 and a bottom nothing, and this did crack my top 3. In fact, it landed right at number 1. And the reason for that is this. First of all, the band sounds amazing. Like, this track cooks. The drumming, especially on this track, is just beautiful, fast-paced rock and roll drumming from front to back. It's very surf rock-ish. Like, it has a very hard punk edge, not just to the guitars, but the lyrics. But this is like hardcore surf rock, if you can envision what that sounds like. And if you can't envision it, then just listen to this song. I highly recommend it. But what really made this track stand out, aside from just the band sounding great, is the fact that both vocally and lyrically, Laura is not holding back. Like, on the verses, she's basically saying, listen, society is going to see you as a freak no matter how good you want to see yourself. And it's a very raw moment in the record that sets the table for what's to come. It describes this feeling of, hey, no matter how good you think you look, everyone else is going to think of you so badly as to think that you're going to be sick. And it is something that she puts out there and then sort of flips back on that on the chorus where she sings about, wanting to be with you. I wish I was here with you. And realistically, there's not a definition of what that person or feeling is. It's a very abstract way to end the chorus, and it works so well because, this person, this feeling may not exist. sort of comfort zone may not exist, but she wants it to exist and she can't. And it's so like very deep in that. And what I love about it most is that these lyrics are very angsty. They're very indrawn, but they're not performed in an indrawn manner. They are very outward. The lyrics are inward. The performance is outward. Laura, like you said, Ryan, sings with a lot of passion and power. It is not holding back in her vocal at all. So when you can mix the confessional nature of the lyrics, the power of the performance, and just the kick-ass level of the band, it's just a great, 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 great rock track and an easy number one for me.
And the many things that you just described, like her ability to deliver such raw, passionate vocals, such a great rock track, and just the way that the lyrics are, like how honest they are. Like this is what makes Against Me such a great band to begin with, and it's a great opening track here because if you don't like this track, cool, you don't have to listen to the rest of the album. But if you do like this track, oh man, you're in for one hell of a treat. Moving over to the next song, if you're ready. The next track is True Trans Soul Rebel.
Yes, True Trans Soul Rebel. And this track is somewhat the same and yet completely different. And what makes it different from the title track are a few key tweaks. Because lyrically, it's very similar to Transgender Dysphoria Blues in that it talks about this feeling of being ostracized by society and this almost created dysphoria, this manufactured dysphoria that is projected onto her by society, and her struggling to deal with that, particularly the lines that end the pre-chorus. It's just a very, very dark song in that regard. But the lyrics themselves are stripped down from the start, because in the start song in Transgender Dysphoria Blues, you have the chorus beginning with, rough surf. And you're just kind of wondering, what is rough surf? I mean, it sounds like a surf song, but what exactly does she mean by rough surf? And what does she mean by I want you to be with me here now? Whereas here, you do not have to question these lyrics. They're pretty cut and dry. So I think that is a major key difference. And another key difference between this and the title track is the music itself, because the band still sounds great, but they sound a lot different. Because while the first track, again, reminded me a little of surf rock, maybe a little of first wave punk, or maybe even, I don't know why Tom Petty came to mind, but I thought of like his faster tracks like I Need to Know or Running Down a Dream. Here, this song sounds almost to a T tone-wise like something from the All-American Rejects, like Move Along or Dirty Little Secret, which is not a bad thing. Those are great songs. But that's kind of what the guitar tones remind me of. It's a minor key song, which, again, the little tweaks make this song very stark in comparison to the title track, even though the subject matter is very much the same. And one last note about this on my end, that bridge is, whoa. That bridge hits very, very hard. It did not land in my top 3, but it's a really, really good second track on this album.
So yeah, I'm gonna start by talking about the bridge that you were talking about, because I'm right there with you. Like that bridge is so good. And like for me, like it's almost like a anti-bridge with how like at first it opens up the feeling of like the track with the instrumentation expanding and getting more expansive, and then it just lingers on the last phrase, you should be living a different life, and then the way that it stops the momentum of the track there and just kicks back in, for me that's always a musical kink of mine. And like in terms of like other thoughts about this track, I'm there with you in terms of like how more raw the lyrics are within True Trans Soul Rebel. And like in a full disclosure, Prior to doing this review, this was one of the tracks off the album that I was just like, it's maybe an album track for me because nothing really stands out for me. But after diving into the lyrics, like this is basically like fears that like transgender people like have of just simply existing, and like the whole second verse here like shows that to a T. Like you get lyrics like "Yet to be born, you're already dead." Like, oh my god, that's such a chef's kiss line. Like, oh, like I love Laura's lyric writing. Like throughout like her whole discography, but even like specifically here, like it's so good. And that lyric is followed up by "You sleep with a gun beside you in bed." Follow it through to the obvious end. Slit your veins wide open. You bleed it out. Like, oh my god, like so good. I love the second verse here. Chorus is pretty solid again. And one thing I will say though about the chorus is I love how like in the chorus the band opens up around the line, "Does God bless your transsexual heart?" And like Laura's on record talking about the song here specifically, saying, "To me, this song is coming from the darkest of places, questioning whether even God has love for a transsexual soul. When the overwhelming majority of societies in the world see trans people as disgusting, sick, or diseased." It asks, the song, "Will you ever find acceptance or understanding as a trans person?" And like that's what they want to have at the end of the day. They want to be accepted or understood. Like they just simply want to be. With that being in mind, like I do appreciate the song a bit more. Thanks to like the sake of the review here, but it didn't crack my top three though. So like we still haven't like we've yet to hit any of my top three, and we've already hit like your favorite song already, but it isn't this song. So yeah, I'm a fan of True Trans Soul Rebel.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it too. And again, that's not a knock on this song, it not being in our top threes, because the a lot of the songs on this album are just very good, very solid rock tracks. So it's not a "you're not good enough." It's a "hey, you're good, but these guys were gooder" type of vibe with these tracks on this album.
If you are cool with it, we can move on to the next track here, which is "Unconditional Love."
I'm cool with that.
So, "Unconditional Love," we get a switch up in the style that the band's bringing to the table. Like the thing I noticed right away that this song almost feels like a bar drinking singing song, like kind of like a swing kind of feel, and I love it. The chorus is great. I love the background shouts of love in the background, like that was a good touch. The drum fills in between the chorus and the verses are great. Like the drummer here is doing the Lord's work. I love what he's bringing to the table, and the halftime breakdown in the bridge is pretty great. But again, once again here, the lyrics are just so good. Like the overall theme of "Unconditional Love" is basically surrounded around the idea of hey, even if your love was unconditional, it wouldn't be enough to save me. Like this person is dealing with deep despair, deep depression, and even if a partner's love was basically, hey, you just have to be yourself, nah, love is not going to be enough to save this person. And like I love that notion. And within the track here, my favorite line that exemplifies that is my authentic depression. I'm addicted to the feeling, the only kind of steady I believe in. So yeah, overall performances are solid. But I will say though the delivery of the lines in the verses are a bit scattered, whereas in the previous two tracks, like they're pretty dead on, straight on within the context of the song, and like for the rest of the LP as well, like the delivery of the lines are really great. Here, it seems like Laura's just trying to get out as many words as possible. Damn any rhythmic sequencing or anything like that. But that didn't do enough to like obviously sink the track into a bottom track contention. I love the track regardless.
I really do too, and the reasons for this is because one, the band continues to sound great. They have very much I almost want to say a Green Day-ish vibe to them with the swing. Like, I've been listening to Minority a little bit lately, and this song reminds me quite a bit of that in its tone and its basic swing. But yeah, the what what you talk about with scattered vocals, I heard as part of the depression that Laura's dealing with on this song. Like, I think that's on purpose, and I think it's meant to convey the sense of I really just do not care right now, and all attempts to save me are futile. I feel futile, and this is just where I'm at, and that nothing can save me, so screw it. And I think that works really, really well. This almost feels like a song to be sung at a bar at like 2 a.m. Like, you can't save me. Even if you love me as much as you can't save me. And it's heavy and it's very sad, but at the same time, it also feels like it's celebrating its own sadness, if that makes any sense. It's basically coming to terms with the fact they cannot come to terms. It is so laced with irony, and it's just down to the fact that this track bounces like a jaunty pub jig, and it has some of the most depressing lyrics I have ever heard and ever read. So to that extent, I give this track bonus points for doing that and pulling it off so well. And to be fair, on any given day, the numbers could change, but as of right now for this review, I have it at number 3. It's just it's a great track in that regard.
Oh man, I actually thought the delivery of the lines was gonna throw you off a little bit. Like, for those of you who want to see a reference point that I was like, thinking about, think about the Gang of Use review that we did. But I'm glad that you love the song. And it seems like you love it a little bit more than me, which is ironic. So, but I am ready to move on to the next track, which is Drinking with the Jocks.
Drinking with the Jocks. Now, for the first few songs, we get very much standard, somewhat punkish, but somewhat eclectic rock and roll. That's very much of a punk attitude and a punk styling with no real solos and just very basic guitar, bass, and drums. And that almost is the case with this song, except for one little titch, and that is Laura goes from singing to shouting. And at first I was a little jarred by that, thinking, okay, now we're just going back into basic screamo or basic metal shouting. But then I got into the lyrics, I'm thinking, no, this was meant to be this. Because Drinking with the Jocks is a song about being an angry guy and wanting to be an angry guy, an angry jock, and doing all the guy things that guys do. Whether it's, get naked in the locker room and, just sort of, for lack of a better term, shove it in everyone's face. And I'm not even going to talk about what's on the second verse because that's even worse. It is very carnivorous male behavior, and the shift from singing to screaming adds a great deal of context to that, and I really appreciated it. The band sounds great again, and it just, again, it's a track that knows what it is, and it feels like it's supposed to be almost like a joke track, almost like Bounce, as we talked about a couple weeks ago with System of a Down. But here, you get that line of, I want so hard to be them. And you just get that feeling of, maybe this is what the dream was all along, but at some point the dream was complete and utter BS. So, yeah, this is a powerful track. Did not quite land in my top 3, though, just because sonically it didn't elevate itself like the other 3 that are in my top 3, but it's still really, really good.
So I want to start the discussion by, drilling down on the lyrics, especially the lyric that you were talking about, which was, I was wishing I was one of them. So this track here, it describes Laura's mindset and self denial about being trans and trying to present as a man around 2007. She went through a bout of intense gender dysphoria, which she recounted on the song "The Ocean" from the 2007 album New Wave that I talked about at the beginning of this review. After making that song, she at the time was fully committed to living as a man. So this track here, it's basically Laura trying to force herself into being a man, drinking with the jocks, like just really just being a man, like doing some swinging motions with body parts, man. But yeah, the lyrics I love. Like one of the lines I really did like a lot was "There will always be a difference between me and you," and also the way that the chorus changes up from the first to the second chorus is noteworthy. The specific phrase it does change up was "just like I was one of them." And then the second chorus, you get "wishing I was one of them." Like I like that a lot. And just overall, like outside of the lyrics, outside of the context of the song, this song just like you mentioned, it rips so hard, and yeah, it's very much punk rock to a T. I think it's one of the shorter tracks off the LP, if I'm not mistaken. However, I like if I had to be very honest with you, this did land in my top three at number three.
All right, all right. I can respect that because it is a very very good track, and again, those little shifts that are made going from singing to screaming, and using that as a mirror for the male attitude, especially in the early 2010s, and granted for the last probably 70 years, if not longer, if not forever. Yeah, it's just. It comes across very well, and I do agree with you that little shift in the choruses is a major move that is very well. And again, on another given day, this probably could have cracked my top three. It was probably a very close competition for what was going to be number three on this album. The first two are pretty set in stone, but number three could be anybody on any given day.
So, if it's okay with you, I'm going to boogie on over to the next track here, which is Osama bin Laden as a crucified Christ.
Sure, let's go with that.
what a track name, man! And we get other excellent track names coming up here shortly in the LP. But yeah, Osama bin Laden as a crucified Christ is the next track here, and again, you get themes here about the just basically what it means to be a trans person in America. I was gonna say at the time, at the time, but no, it's probably even nowadays, sadly. But the lyrics here are centered around the violence against trans people. I mean, I can't really go into the lyrics so much, but because they are pretty graphic in nature. But pulling it up right now to see if there's anything I can identify. You get in the first verse, what's the best end you can hope for? And that verse ends with the lyric, a bullet in the head and a bullet in the chest. And then in the second verse, you get the opening, what's the best thing you can hope for? A blindfold and a ball gag, burnt out eyes, grotesque beauty, a nail through the feet, and a nail through the hands. Basically, the research I was able to do about this track, basically, the whole, I don't know, there's a certain moment within the track where Laura's talking about, the way that trans people deal with sexual encounters, where people sometimes take pity on trans people. I felt that was handled pretty well. And like the outside of the lyrics though, just the whole track as a whole, like it has such a menacing opening, and like that groove that is introduced right away explodes into like the main portion of the track. I love how like that motif is used throughout the whole track. Um, and like right out of the gate, you get the chorus, which is really solid, and I love the use of the guitar to match Laura's vocals note for note. Like I'm always a huge fan of that. And I just really love how the band grooves in the verses. And for much of this album so far, we've gotten straightforward, like instrumentation. But here, it just seems like they're really grooving. Laura's vocals sound really passionate here. I mean, like I mentioned in like a couple other of the tracks so far, like that's one of the things that draws me to her work so much. But like here specifically, it seems like they're taking it up to 11, and like the use of Benito Mussolini and his lover, and also like Osama bin Laden slash Jesus, like in the song title, are just they're used as metaphors for people who died for what they believe in. So like it's kind of the same battle that trans people face day in day out. Yeah, this is a great track. I love it a lot. Could have been in my top three, but yeah, for one reason or another, like when we get to my other two, like favorite tracks, like those did it for me a little bit more. Catch Me on a Different Day. This could have been the third favorite track for me, though.
I'm right there with you because this is probably, if I was to have to rank them right now, 1 through 10, this is probably number 4 for me. So not quite in my top 3, but man, it is good. Because basically for everything you've said about dealing with the potential martyrdom that comes with this kind of violence, and that at the end of the day, the most extreme people who want war are probably thinking about committing war crimes, and that's what's going on in this topic. That's what's going on in this subject. The one thing I will add to what you said, though, is musically, the reason it sounds so good is because it reminded me a lot of like peak era White Stripes. It has a very much like Jack White tone to it, and a very punchy, hard groove to it. I thought at first it sounded like Rage Against the Machine because it was so political, but I realized that was kind of just the lyrics. Here it's more or less the White Stripes sound with Rage Against the Machine lyrics. And when you combine that, that's pretty good. That's pretty good stuff. And this track is quite good in that regard. The band sounds great. Laura sounds great. And the lyrics, again, they're pretty dense and they're pretty graphic, like you said, but they get the point across, and you can't really argue against that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like, shout out to you for, catching the White Stripes, like, I don't want to say influence, but like the sound of it. Maybe that's what, like, drew me to this song here, even specifically. Like, yeah, I'm a huge fan of, Osama bin Laden as a crucified Christ in terms of a, song title. But, yeah, Matthew, I got a question for you before we get into the next track here, which is "Fuck My Life 666."
And what would that question be, Ryan?
If the dear listener out there right now really enjoys us as a concept and what we're bringing to the table right here with this review, what are some ways that they can help support what you and I do on a week in, week out basis?
Well, what they can do is keep on listening to Hey, Listen to This, and by doing that, supporting us. How do you do that? Well, we are available on pretty much any podcast streaming platform you can think of, whether it's Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple Music. And we also have our episodes up on YouTube if you want to put that on your YouTube playlist for a rainy day or your drive to work, because some people have very long drives to work. Hi, how you doing? And for those who want to spread the word, we are available on social media as well. We have a Blue Sky account. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. And the aforementioned YouTube. If you're on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you like a video you see and like multiple videos you see and want to keep following us week in, week out as we do these episodes. Get the word out because, again, some of you may hear an album we talk about and be like, hey, I know a friend that likes an album, or I know a family member who likes an album, so you could share it with them. You could tag us on our socials and find us that way. And if you want to reach out to us directly and you don't know us personally, we have an email, and that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. That is ttheylisten@gmail.com. ttheylisten is also the username we have for our social medias if you're trying to find us there as well. And again, to anyone who's listened so far to one or two, or heaven forbid, all of our episodes, I have this listed as number 80, so we are in the 80s now. So for those who have followed us this long, thank you so much for doing so, because, again, we love doing this, and we love you coming along for the ride.
Absolutely, and it's always a pleasure of mine, dissecting music and reviewing music, and I think that we make a great pair here. So it's been one hell of a journey that's taken us all the way from Toledo to the Tortured Poets Department.
Oh yeah, I like that. I like that.
All right, so you ready to dive into the back half of the album here with the next track, which is "Fuck My Life 666." What a track name!
What a track name, and potentially the unofficial phone number to reach out to us here on Hey, Listen to This. So if I think that's too many digits, but we'll have to double check on that. So this track, once again, switching up styles, it seems, because I've been talking a lot on each track about a band or a sound it reminds me of. And the band I pinpointed for this track was the Gaslight Anthem. Very roots rocky, very up-tempo, very stripped down guitars in a sense, but very fast guitars as well. And the lyrics this time around are dealing with a very personal matter, which is the effect that the transition that Laura is going through and what it'll have on her current marriage. And it's obviously a very deep and confrontational song. I would probably say it's self-confrontational, because it's obviously a tough thing to deal with. Like, will this still work? Can this still work? And if it's not going to work, then what now? And especially, the way this hits especially is on the outro of the song, where for a brief second, Laura says, I'm finally free. I'm finally free. And it cuts into that mantra of self-doubt and worry that is in the chorus throughout the entire song. So I didn't have this track in my top 3, but once again, the band sounds great. The lyrics are great. And the little details, particularly on that outro, where the mind shifts from questioning to jubilation, back to questioning in just a rapid succession, really worked for me. So yeah, this track's good too.
You hit the nail right on the head. For me, knowing that, because I've been a huge fan of this album for years. I own it on vinyl, and I've listened to this album, this track here, too, multiple times. I never really realized that it was specifically about Laura's concerns about her marriage after coming out as transgender. And for me, there's countless amount of examples of how she executes the expression of that doubt. But for me, it's exemplified very hardcore in the second verse. And you get lyrics with her talking about she doesn't want to live without teeth, doesn't want to live without bite, which is often those phrases of teeth and bite are often used as descriptors for Laura's music. And also you get lyrics saying I never want to say that I regret it, but also you get the end of the verse talking about never want to say that we grew apart, and never want to say that the feelings changed. So it's a very, very deep song. I love it a lot. Outside of the lyrics and the meaning, like the way that the track begins with that little guitar lick and the organic yell, like the it wasn't a yell, but it was like a like almost kind of like a random shout. I love that. It was a great way to open up the track. The chorus is so solid. I did dig the moment where the band does emphasize the phrase "heart to match." There's a couple moments in this LP where the band does emphasize certain phrases within a chorus. I felt like that, like those moments are a highlight for me off the LP, and it draws the listener into like certain phrases. So I love that. The backing vocals that you hear throughout the track are a nice touch. Yeah, for me, like this could have been another top track for me, but Drinking with the Jocks was just so much in your face, and the lyrics were just so explicit that I could not, in good conscience, not keep it on my top three. And the other two tracks, when we get to it, I'll explain why. But yeah, I very much enjoy "Fuck My Life 666" as well.
Right, which is kind of an ironic statement, but very much understood. Also, for those keeping track, Ryan has yet to reveal his top two tracks, and we have 4 to go. I have revealed my top track and my third favorite track, so I have 1 left to go in my top 3, and neither of us have a bottom 0.
So, moving on to the next track here, which is Dead Friend. And for me, like, I'm going to talk about the context of, like, what is this song about. And it's about Laura's friend, Pope, who also inspired the title of the previous track, Fuck My Life 666. Pope was a lighting designer who worked on an Against Me tour and became friends with the band. While working on the tour, though, he fell and broke his foot, causing him to be hospitalized. The band moved on with other things, and the doctors did treat Pope for more than just his foot, eventually over-medicating him, which led to his death at the age of only 26. And you get countless amount of lyrics here where you can really feel that Laura's grieving her dead friend. And for me, like an absolute highlight for me that exemplified such grief was she waits for you to haunt her. She sleeps with your ghost at night in bed. Like, I love that set of lyrics. It's really solid. Outside of that, though, everything else is pretty standard compared to what we've heard so far in the LP. Like, it's not bad, but this is pretty much cut and dry, like, rock instrumentation. The drum work is pretty solid throughout the track. The chorus is solid. And I also love the repetition of the phrase, she would fall in love with the first boy she kissed in a casket. Like, that's an interesting phrase. But I did like how it came across in the chorus. But yeah, just overall, Dead Friend. I think this might be the most album. This is probably going to be the only track off the album, which is like pretty much like an album track. Like even outside, like if it wasn't for the context of the meaning of the track, I would be like, it's an okay track. I like it a good bit, but compared to the rest of the offering so far, it's definitely not cracking into the top half of the album.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Sound-wise, it is pretty standard. Although I did like the way that Laura, particularly at the end of the chorus, where she's just cursing about missing her dead friend. I really like how earnest that was. Like, that stood out to me as like a highlight on this track. But aside from that, you pretty much nailed everything else down to a T. The lyrics do a good job of describing the death of the Pope, and not to mention how it will affect not just Laura's life, but Laura herself, and thinking, hey, this sucks, and this really sucks for you, and the fact that it really sucks for you sucks for me, and just wrestling with all that, and just coming to conclusions like, I miss him, and this sucks, end of story. And once again, kind of like Unconditional Love, it has a bit of an ironic sort of upbeat feel to it. Like, not upbeat and swinging like Unconditional Love was, but very much, like you say, a very standard rock track in that regard. Did not crack my top 3 either, but it's solid. And I would probably say this and the previous track are probably like the most album trackiest tracks on the record. But if these are your like album trackiest tracks, you did a pretty dang good job.
Yeah, let me set the record straight. Whenever I say, look, this is like an album track, like when I were to, if I were to be telling somebody like, hey, what are tracks that I need to listen to off of this LP, in order to really like get what like this album brings to the table. This probably won't be in the first like 5 or 6 tracks that I mentioned, but no, it's still a solid track. It's not like yeah. Anyways, moving on. That way I don't fall into the redundancy hole. You ready to kick off the next track here, which is Two Coffins?
Yes, Two Coffins, and this is probably the most different sounding track on the entire album because everything else up to this point, from the start title track to the last track, which is Dead Friend, it's pretty much been straight rock and roll. Maybe not all 4/4, but it's very much been loud guitar, loud bass, loud drums, passionate vocals. Here you have more of a dark folk song that immediately reminded me of the Raconteurs, because you can envision the black and white nature of this track and how Laura is going to the two coffins that she's describing and perhaps being in one of them. And while sonically it reminded me of the Raconteurs, singing wise and writing wise, lyrically, it felt like the Smiths. Like this felt like a Morrissey track from start to finish. Like just, two coffins, what of it? Here we are, and I guess this is just how it's going to be. It's very sardonic and very self-aware of how screwed up things are, and much like Unconditional Love, it's realizing, hey, there's a dead end here. There's really not much we can do with this. And oh, what a release this will be to be free in death. And it's a very dark song. I like it. Did not land in my top 3, but I will give it a lot of credit, and especially within the context of the album, it's very important because it provides that little sonic break amid all the thrashing and bashing. Like, this is them pulling back and saying, okay, let's give your ears a break. Let's give your mind a break. And we're not gonna take away the darkness, because there's still a lot of that here, but we're not going to be thrashing and bashing like we have. And I thought that was a very intelligent decision to do that on this album. But aside from that, I can't really say this track super stood out. It's solid. It's solid. It's good. I like it.
I'm a bit higher on the track than you are. And I agree with you that for this track to come like where it did in terms of like, compared to like the rest of the tracks so far on the LP, for it to be like a complete change up, like it's a really good moment within the album. Such an emotional acoustic song. And context about this song though. Laura wrote this song for her daughter, Evelyn Gable. And it basically, this is Evelyn, well, this is Laura's, like, message to her about, like, dealing with impermanence and savoring life's little moments before they fade away. And, like, for me, within the context of that, I love how the chorus is. It's utterly perfect, considering, like, this was written for her kid. And the lyrics in the chorus are, how lucky I ever was to see the way that you smiled at me. Your little moon face shining bright at me. One day soon, there'll be nothing left of you and me. And like, oh my God, chef's kiss, put that in a fish and just slap me with it, man. Like, I just love that so much. And outside of the chorus there, though, love the second verse wherever she's talking about like all the things she's left to lose will someday be gone to, back into annihilation. And just overall though, the phrase of two coffins for sleep, when you think about how the song was written for Evelyn, like that's kind of a haunting like it's haunting imagery right there. It's an especially haunting kind of song. I love this track a lot. Could have crept into my top three, but did not, man. So you basically know what my other two favorite tracks are because
Yeah, we're down to the final two, and you have yet to reveal your top two. So we will figure out what those are soon enough. And I say we get right into it with Paralytic States, which one it'll be, and what your thoughts on it are.
so before we go into Paralytic States, one thing I just want to say about like my relationship with the album and like how it like flows. We from the how the album ends with like these three songs: Two Coffins, Paralytic States, and Black Me Out. It reminds me like the tracks flow so well together. It kind of reminds me of the end of Abbey Road, where it just seems like the like it's just such a natural flow, and just the way that the one track flows into the other one and flows into another one, it just seems like one complete package. So, that being said, Paralytic States. Why is it one of my favorite tracks off this album here? So the whole track, it basically, at least to me, seems like it's come from the mindset of a transgender person who's having a mental and emotional breakdown within a hotel room. And the way that Laura's able to, execute that mindset to a T is utterly perfection. Like how the track whole like opens up with that guitar lick and the rest of the instrumentation joining in. Chef's kiss on how like the sonic palette is being laid out, and then the first lyrics being she could hear them fucking through the thin hotel walls. Like, God, that's so good. Like the way that it comes across. Oh my God, I love it so much. And like the chorus again within this song is solid again. Nothing really too amazing, but they're like, it's a solid chorus. And just the way that this moment here specifically came across, considering the context of the album, considering the context of the song, considering the context of what Laura was going through at the time, like this is one of my favorite musical moments ever. And the lyrics that that are like basically that highlight this musical moment are standing naked in front of that hotel bathroom mirror in her dysphoria's reflection. She still saw her mother's son. Like, talk about like mental distress. Like, again, this is where I want to come from the standpoint of saying like I'm heterosexual male, white male in America. So I don't know what I don't know what transgender people go through, but that's such an honest portrayal of the mental and like emotional struggles that Laura was going through at the time that I give her all the credit in the world for bringing to the table. And one thing I love about music is like the ability of an artist to exercise their demons, and through that process somebody who's listening to the art that artist produced can exercise their own demons. And this track here, this whole album here specifically, is very important for people who may not have the courage to stand up for themselves and battle for their gender identity. But outside of that, like that's such an impactful statement to make. The way that the whole track ends is so good, with the feeling of everything crashing and coming to an end, with the talk about the ball dropping, it was already over, no resolutions for the new year beginning tomorrow. Yeah, like this is such a great track, man. It is my second favorite track off the LP. And when we get to Black Me Out, I will gush even further on that track.
I was gonna say I may need to wipe my screen after that, because that was A heavy amount of gushing for Paralytic States, and honestly, I'm right there with you. It is also my second favorite track on the album, so my top three is completed. And the reason why I chose this over the others is pretty simple. For a lot of the reasons you said, the lyrics are so graphic, they are detailed, they very much are a story song in the best ways possible. From the first verse talking about how, she's realizing that, hey, maybe I'm not one of the guys after all. Maybe I'm not a boy. Maybe I'm not meant to be a man. To that part you mentioned about standing in front of the mirror and dealing with dysphoria. Like, it's such a adventure going from self-realization to questioning that realization and dealing with the struggles, and it's put out there so wonderfully. That chorus is fantastic. And the note I have about this track that you haven't already mentioned is that nothing is sacrificed in the ways of performance, pulse, or lyrics, because the lyrics are very graphic and very hitting. The performance, the singing is phenomenal, and the band sounds great again. And the pulse is just pounding down the walls, rock and roll. It is such a great track that it's kind of hard, again, to top what you said, but it is just magnificent. And it's one of those tracks where it does a grand job of defining the album in such a wonderful way. Like, on another given day, this possibly could knock out Transgender Dysphoria Blues for number one, but on this day, it is a strong number two.
I'm glad that you enjoy this track. Well, technically, along the same level as me. So, like,
technically speaking, you probably like it a little more. You probably like it a little more than I do, but I think we both technically have it at the number two spot.
Yeah, but like, it's such an important track, and I'm glad that none of us had a bottom track here within the LP. I'm glad that we thoroughly enjoyed it. So, you ready to finish the discussion out with the closing track, which is Black Me Out?
Yes, Black Me Out, the final track on this album. And basically, this is a tribute song to all the traditional punk fans, or the traditional, like, hardcore rock fans that, for lack of a better term, have this sort of, or I'll back up, had. I'm not sure they still do. They might in certain circles, but early 2010s, most of the black t-shirt wearing, spike-haired wearing, typical punk fans were not only men, but acted very male. And this is basically Laura saying, listen, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to kowtow to that. And anyone who wants me to can, well, I can't say what she says, but for long story short, she basically says, screw you and the horse you rode in on. And it's very powerful. It's very strong. And basically declaring that punk, as it is traditionally, with its, again, very male pulse, like it was with the Sex Pistols, or even someone like Black Flag, for example, that sort of grunting male image of punk is pretty much dead to her, and she's going to make sure it stays dead if she has to. It is a brilliant way to end the album, because it's basically taking the whole, this is me dealing with my issues as a person, and applying that to her position as a public persona. Like, this is almost an anti-Stan song. Like, we talked about Stan last week. Like, this is the exact opposite of Stan. Like, Stan was about, hey, I know who my fans are, and I understand that what I do may cause their consequences. Whereas Laura's saying, these are not my fans, these people suck, and I am going to make sure that they are not representing my fans, because I'm going to do very non-fan things to these non-fans. Walls of your house be damned. It is a great track to close out the album. Did not quite crack my top 3. I'd probably say this is around like the 5 or 6 level, but it's still just a really, really good way to end the album. And now the floor is yours.
So, Black Me Out. Favorite song off the LP. End of discussion. No, just kidding. So, that would be the ultimate like anticlimax there. So, Black Me Out was the first track that got me really excited for when this album was dropping. Like I first heard this track through a YouTube video that just featured Laura with an acoustic guitar, just singing this as plain as day, and the raw emotion that she emulated there translates here to a T. And I'm gonna expand upon a couple of things that you were talking about within your discussion of Black Me Out. Like for me, this is one of the best songs ever. It is the epitome of an FU song. Like the anger and the sheer raw defiance for wanting to be who you are as a person. Like this is basically that song to a T. Like, the way that the track begins basically has Laura singing the thesis statement of such defiance, which is, I don't ever want to talk that way again. I don't want to know people like that anymore. As if there was an obligation, as if I owed you something. Like, basically just saying, hey, I want to live my life. And considering, like, the context of Transgender Dysphoria Blues and how this was Laura, dealing with her dysphoria about her gender identity, like, hats off for her for making a song like this and basically having the courage to make that transition, considering like songs like Fuck My Life 666 and like also like, Two Coffins, where she had a wife, she had a kid, and like she was dealing with feelings about like, hey, is this gonna affect my marriage? Also, how's this going to affect my relationship with my daughter? But outside of that context, though, like the way that the after the thesis statement is sung by Laura, the way that the chorus hits, like it is probably the most impactful moment that I've had where someone hits me in the face with a fish. In terms of a musical moment within the show, like, oh my god, it's so fucking good. Lyrics, no notes, they are perfection. Like even in the second verse here, like you get more lyrics about, I don't want to see the world that way anymore. I don't want to feel that weak and insecure, as if you were my fucking pimp, as if I was your fucking whore. The way that, like, oh my god, I just love the way that second verse was executed. And shout out to Laura for executing plenty of examples of second verses being excellent throughout this LP. Like I noticed that it's like a weird theme, like Chef's Kiss, I love that. And the way that the whole track ends, the way the whole album ends, it just feels like such an exclamation part for this whole statement, this whole journey that we've been on. So like for me, like anytime that I'm feeling like weak and insecure and wanting to be who I am and stand up for who and what I believe in, like I look to tracks like this as like motivation for me to be who I am. And I'm just a white heterosexual male in America. So like, I can't imagine what transgender people have to go in a day in a day in day out basis. But yeah, that's the beauty. That's one of the beautiful things about this track here is that even though like this track here was specifically written for one purpose, I have nothing that I can relate to, but I can take stuff from this track here and use it in my own life. So yeah, easy favorite track off the whole LP for me.
Again, that's a very I respect that very immensely. Again, on another day, this probably cracks a number 3 spot, maybe even number 2, because it, again, like you said, is so very in your face. And again, it feels like this is a situation where even if Laura hadn't gone through the transitioning that she did and was just another, punk rock singer, like this song could still apply because, one of the parts of growing up is learning, hey, being closed-minded is not okay. And so that's basically what she's saying in the song is like, listen, your closed-minded attitude and your, me against the world attitude and, punch everything that moves attitude, the old meme of Kyle punching the wall. Like, that's not going to fly here. And so, yeah, like, it's so good in that regard. I guess the reason it didn't quite land for me is because musically it's more on the standard side, it seems. But again, on future listens, that might change. But those are future listens. As far of this present listen and this present review, thus closes Transgender Dysphoria Blues. We could say those magic words.
We did it, man.
We did it, man. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what...
I'll say that we kicked off Pride Month in a very defiant fashion, with, experiencing such a punk rock album, not experiencing, but reviewing such a punk rock album about transgender dysphoria blues by Against Me. So
absolutely. So I'll let you go ahead and go first with this one because I have a sicking feeling I know what your thoughts are going to be.
So for me, I've had such an important relationship with Against Me and Laura Jane Grace as a whole throughout the years. The band went on to do one more LP after this, which was Shape Shift with Me. But after that, they haven't released anything since. Laura's done, countless amount of EPs and LPs afterward that are really great. But specifically within this album, it's simply amazing. And it's everything that I love about music. Earlier when I was talking about Paralytic States, I highlighted the ability of an artist such as Laura to exercise her demons and an audience being able to exercise their demons alongside them. It's a communal exorcism. And even though I am a heterosexual male, like I mentioned countless amount of times in this review, I was able to relate to many of these songs. Black Me Out will forever be a staple in my life for my love of music and Laura as a whole. There's countless amount of examples deeper tracks off the album, True Trans Soul Rebel, that I was able to appreciate a little bit more thanks to this review. And Unconditional Love, again, thanks to this review. I'm not going to give this album a beefy 10 out of 10. I'm going to give it one slight tick down. I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm coming from this from the perspective of someone who did not assimilate Against Me into their discography and may not do so after this review either, just because I'm a stubborn man, a stubborn, as you say, heterosexual male who knows what he likes. But that being said, I listened to this album and I cannot find any flaws with it. At worst, the tracks are good. The tracks are worst at good. Tracks like Dead Friend or Two Coffins, or even, like you say, True Trans Soul Rebel, those are good tracks. Then you get to the tracks that really stand out, like the title track, like Paralytic States, like Unconditional Love, like Black Me Out, I'll throw in there too. Just really, really good rock and roll. And even if you aren't familiar with, this band or this front person as, their stories, you don't have to. Like, you can hear this album and figure out what the story is, who this is directed towards, and what the ins and outs of this are, because the writing is magnificent. It is real. I think I've used this quote before, but if I haven't, I'll use it again. Back when I was watching the series Classic Albums that talked about classic rock and roll albums, they were talking about the Doors' debut LP. And Jack Holtzman, who was the founder of Elektra Records, said of that album, what I'm going to say about this album, is that this is a perfect album, and what makes a perfect album is that you wouldn't want to change a thing. And there's nothing here I would say needs to be better. There's nothing here that I say, oh, tweak this or, fix that. Everything sounds like a definitive statement. It's as confessional as something like Joni Mitchell's Blue or Bob Dylan's Blow on the Tracks. It rocks like nobody else's business. And one other thing I haven't mentioned here is just that everything is engineered so clearly. Like, nothing's muddled, nothing's buried, nothing's, standing out in a way it shouldn't. Everything is produced cleanly, loudly, and proudly. And what a better way to start our Pride discussion with a proud-sounding, proudly written album. I'm going to go one better than you. I'm giving this a 10.
Oh, you went full 10 out of 10. You delivered, to be fair, man. So
I did. Because again, like, there's something about this where it's just like, I can't find anything worth changing. Like, I can't. Like, this is, like, if this was the only album they'd ever released, it's a great discography.
I can truly appreciate that. And I'm glad that you gave it a 10 out of 10. So your 10 and my 9.5 equal out to be an average of 9.75 because
math
works for everybody. So for me, I'm gonna actually, recommend two things in terms of next album recommendations. In terms of if you've enjoyed Transgender Dysphoria Blues, where should you go to next? One, in terms of a pure contextual standpoint, and the way that you'll so what the listener out there can really really get the full context of Laura's mindset during this time. She actually wrote a book. The book is called Tranny. And it's autobiographical, but really focusing around the transgender dysphoria that she experienced throughout her life. So if you want to dive further into Laura's life and her journey as a transgender person, I'd heavily recommend reading Tranny by Laura Jane Grace. But if the listener out there is like, but Ryan, this is a next album recommendation, not a next book recommendation. Okay, Paul, I got you, man. So the next album recommendation, though, I would throw out there would be an album that I feel like doesn't get nearly as much credit as I think it rightfully deserves, and that would be an album that Laura released with the Devouring Mothers. So the official group name is Laura Jane Grace and the Devouring Mothers, and that album is Bought to Rot. One of my favorite solo releases that she's done since going outside of Against Me. Fantastic LP. Severely underrated. So, Bought to Rot by Laura Jane Grace and the Devouring Mothers would be my next album recommendation.
For me, this is going to be a little different because contextually, I don't really have an album that quite lives up to this as far as the subject matter. Musically, however, there are several candidates I've thought about during this review, and I'm just going to sort of not cop out, but I'll make my reasons here in a second. I'm going to start this Pride Month by recommending the last album I recommended at the end of our last DI initiative. When we were talking about Paramore's Riot, the album I recommended then is the album I'm going to recommend now, and that is Celebration Rock by the Japandroids. And the reason is very simple. Loud guitars, fast-paced rock, passionate vocals, and songs about trying to find who you are in a lost world. So, yeah, celebration rock, Japandroids, my next recommendation based off this album.
Excellent recommendation, man. I'm always a fan of that album specifically. So, dear listener, to summarize the whole, ratings and next album recommendations, our average rating came out to be a 9.75 out of 10. My next album recommendation was Bought to Rot by Laura Jane Grace and the Devouring Mothers. And also, I did a side recommendation of Laura's book called Tranny. Matt recommended Celebration Rock by the Japandroids. So, yeah. What a way to kick off Pride Month here, man.
Yeah, we kicked off with quite a beefer.
All right, so speaking about beef, we got one more thing to, settle up before we officially wrap this beefy review into bed. Matt, it is your turn to pick or, set up the table for next week's review. What do you have cooked up for us?
So I thought about giving you a choice between two albums, but a slight peek behind the curtain here. We may be doing a discography draft later on this same day. So because of that, and one of the albums being part of the artist I think I'm going to pick, I'm not going to give you an option because I'm going to make that selection for you. So we are dialing it back to 1984 with our next review. And the album we're going to be talking about is called Make It Big by Wham.
Make It Big by Wham, released in 1984. I'm ready, man. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about some Wham.
Yeah, some good old-fashioned Wham.
Oh, man. So, dear listener out there, if you've not listened to Make It Big by Wham, released in 1984, make sure you, check out that album before next week's review. That way you can have opinions about that album. And then also, in addition, you can have opinions about the opinions that me and Matt are going to be bringing to the table. But, yeah, until next time, I am the one who, isn't afraid to, call an audible because his microphone is glitching out on him, Ryan James Kearns.
And I'm the only one that recognizes that I'm not the only one who can peek behind the curtain, Matthew James Durzik.
And yeah, just until next week, based on how exciting this review has been, just until next week, you can just black me out.
All right, then.